Do you like Harry Potter? Do you like wearing Harry Potter merchandise and contributing to the online fan community? Do you like funding the rise of fascism in the UK and worldwide? No? Well, I was sure you would say yes to that. You see, JK Rowling, writer and intellectual property owner of famous magical child, Harold Potterpotamus, has been going on an interesting journey these past few years. Where once she was but a simple Gordon Brown stan with an obvious distaste for fat people, now she's extended her hatred to not just those of us with a few pounds more on us than your average wizard, but to the transgender community. And as that hatred has intensified, the company she keeps has become increasingly troubling. Why, you only have to watch the video JK Rowling's New Friends by Sean, a scouse skull that can talk, to know that she's been cozying up to people who are at least fascist adjacent, if not fascist for a while now. But it seems that in these last few months, the most depressed, castle-dwelling billionaire of all time has decided it's time to go mask off, or mask offer? Masker offer? Mask off. Because if we're being honest, her mask off moment was that Turf Wars essay where she came out as someone who hates trans people like full time rather than just, dabbling in it like your typical British celebrity. And everyone who continued to support her after that, well, if you have a trans friend, you're probably on thin ice with them. Nevertheless, the average person on the street doesn't use Twitter because they have either taste or sense or both. So most people don't know what she's been up to recently. And those that do know what she's been up to probably don't realise quite how bad it's gotten. But after being asked innocently if I'm into Harry Potter these days, has sort of become like asking someone if they like the design of the gun that's currently riddling them with bullets. Personally, I just don't like being shot. Everything else is secondary.
I've got some bad news, Harry. Norbert isn't doing too well. He's very sick. We need to make him some special dragon tonic to pep him up again. The tonic needs some very rare components, though, when there aren't any in the castle. So you and I must go to Diagon Alley to get them.
Hello from whatever the opposite of the wizarding world is. I'm Brigitte Empire, science and culture correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, the only newspaper columnist in Britain who doesn't have JK Rowling on speed dial because she blocked my number after she found out that I had a penis until 2018, which to her is equivalent to robbing a bank or being fat in her hierarchy of things she doesn't like. The Daily Telegraph, incidentally, is the only newspaper in Britain that will still hire a trans person like me, because none of our editors can be exposed to sunlight without turning into a pile of Tory-shaped dust. So the culture war currently being waged on transgender people hasn't quite reached them yet. Quite convenient for me, isn't it? Well, I'm going to use this platform. I inevitably will be shoved off by my corporate overlords to warn everyone of my generation to please stop, for the love of God, buying Harry Potter books, Harry Potter merchandise, fucking chocolate frogs, everything. Don't stream the movies. Don't play Wizard Game. All of that stuff, because it's actively supporting a fascist, and a rich fascist at that, who has demonstrated multiple times that she sees money coming in from fans as an endorsement of her ideas, and that she's willing to spend that money on paying fascists spreading hate, not just in the UK, but around the world. Listen, every millennial... Okay, scratch that. Most millennials had a Harry Potter obsession. As a child, as a teenager, as an adult, as all of those things continuously, and I don't blame them. I read the books multiple times as a child. I was obsessed. My parents read them to me when I was younger. I queued up for the later ones. I personally wrote to JK Rowling and she wrote back. She was my hero. I fell asleep to Stephen Fry reading the audiobooks. I, as a child, went around head to toe in Gryffindor gear, despite obviously being a Ravenclaw, unless being told, "You're so brave," over and over again by boomers tips the scales there. I don't know how the sorting hat works, and I don't plan to find out. Besides, it's probably transphobic anyway, so, where was I? Oh yes, I was obsessed. I queued outside at midnight for the last book like everyone else. I joined a Harry Potter society at uni, drank butter beers, had a Patronus, all of that stuff. I even owned one of the ones you can buy at Harry Potter World after going to Harry Potter World, or whatever it's called. And, eventually I had to throw it away. I really treasured that for a while. The books meant a lot to me. The reason why I want to be a fantasy writer, why I write fantasy in the first place, it sparked my obsession with the genre. And after a while, I couldn't look at that wand anymore. It was one of my prized possessions when I got it. As time went on, it became a reminder of the hatred one of my personal heroes has for me, someone she's never met, and people like me. For no reason but disgust. Really, I only threw it away because when I looked at it, all I could think was that Rowling had made it very clear multiple times that she would really prefer I be a corpse than a woman. The thing is, you can enjoy a piece of media and still have principles, right? If it came out that Eiichiro Oda hated black people, for example, I wouldn't spend any money on One Piece manga, and I wouldn't watch any media around it that would give him a cut. But it seems like there's a hierarchy of bigotries that people keep stored in their heads. And for a lot of people, transphobia just isn't a big enough deal to warrant them not buying a pair of Hufflepuff socks. Like, sure, the money I spent just might contribute to someone saying they should put my friends against the wall and call the firing squad, but I really need a pair of socks that has a badger on it so that everyone knows I like the series that everyone likes. There are ways around this, such as not buying Harry Potter merchandise, maybe making your own if you need it that bad, or others that I can't mention for legal reasons. But if you're buying official Wizarding World merch, playing official games, watching official streams, etc., you're actively putting money into Rowling's pocket. And she's not spending that money on food and bills. She's a billionaire. She's sorted for that. This is pocket change to her, and she's been fairly open about being willing to throw that money at some of the most hateful people on the planet. I'm here today to argue that supporting JK Rowling at this point is plainly supporting fascism. You can disagree with that, but if you do, just know that you're wrong, basically. Every penny that goes towards Harry Potter sees a significant chunk go to the author of the series, since Rowling is one of the few authors that actually got a good deal on that whole intellectual property rights malarkey. And she said on record that she's offered money and will continue to offer money to fascist World Tour superstar Kelly J. Keane Minshall, aka Posey Parker, who was regularly teamed up with literal Nazis at her rallies, spoke with people quoting Hitler, encouraged men to go into women's toilets with guns just in case a transgender happened to be taking a leak, and a whole bunch of other things more prolific essayists than me, for example Sean, who I mentioned earlier, have talked about for years.
Do you know the big lie? The big lie was first described by Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. The big lie is such a big lie that ordinary people like us think, well, that can't be a lie, because I'd never tell any as big a lie as that. We only lie in small ways. The big lie, well, there is one big lie going on, and it was begun by men in the early part of the 20th century. It was began when they had an erotic fantasy, and they decided they were going to sell us the big lie. And what is the big lie? The big lie is trans women are...
All that doesn't even scratch the surface of Rowling's fascist company, however. Lest we forget, she's friends with Helen Joyce, a woman who's openly called for a reduction in the number of trans people, both adult and child, happy or sad, calling trans people a huge problem to a sane world, which you might recognise as a fairly similar line that the Third Reich would have used to justify their own shoving of transgender people into, well, you know what I'm talking about, and I don't want to get demonetised.
And that means reducing or keeping down the number of people who transition. And that's for two reasons. One of them is that every one of those people is a person who's been damaged. But the second one is every one of those people is basically, a huge problem to a sane world.
So, convinced? No? Okay, well, what if I told you that recently she took a step even further than that? A step towards being more open about her fascism, rather than just hanging out publicly with fascists, offering to fund fascists in public, and let me let Wizarding News take this one. A reliable source on the latest bullshit Rowling has been doing, of course. I, as not a wizard, nor a witch, although I couldn't be a witch because Rowling wrote the series, so I would be stuck as being a wizard, even though I have massive tits. Anyway, let them do the talking. Who did JK Rowling retweet today? Christopher Rufo. an American right-wing extremist spreading anti-trans and racist rhetoric. Her sad, dangerous dive into open bigotry continues unabashed. This is why it's far past time to stop supporting JKR through her Harry Potter franchise. So, why is this a big deal? She retweeted an extremist. I mean, she has done several times before. She supported Matt Walsh, for example. So, it should be a big deal. But all of those times should be a big deal as well. So why am I pointing this out in particular? Well, here's some background on Christopher Rufo. And for those who still wish to separate Rowling from her ongoing dive into being a professional hater, the tweet in question that she retweeted is, "This is haunting. A doctor at a major children's hospital explains how puberty blockers shut down a child's hypothalamus, which controls emotions, sexuality, and the aesthetic sense. To shut that system is to shut down what makes us human." So, as you can see, this statement, which Rowling has openly endorsed through the dark magic of Twitter, X, is bad enough on its own without even taking into context its author. The claim here, clearly, is that trans people are not human, at least once we've taken puberty blockers. We become something else, which is language you might find familiar from this little decade called the 1930s. If you know, even the slightest amount of history. Or, in other contexts with similar intent, such as during the Rwandan...
Norbert.
One of the necessary things fascist regimes do to manufacture consent for their maltreatment and murder of human beings is to dehumanize the people they are targeting, and trying to root it in scientific language is an easy way to do that. Think about how the Nazis used the then popular pseudoscience of eugenics to justify their hatred of Jews, disabled people, Romani people, queer people, Slavs, black people, and pretty much everyone who wasn't a straight, white, able-bodied German with far-right politics. This is more than a parallel. This is the same exact tactic. And Rowling isn't just considering it, she's sharing it to her millions of followers. Remember, she's one of the most famous people on the planet. Almost certainly the most famous author. So, in no world is this not a big deal. She has a massive platform, and the responsibility that comes with that platform to not spread rhetoric on that platform that might cause a word beginning with G. Second of all, puberty blockers shut down a child's hypothalamus? What? That's not how brains work. I mean, I'm not surprised that a fascist and a children's author both failed to grasp scientific concepts beyond boys wearing blue, girls wearing pink, trans people fuck off into the sea, but come on guys, do a little reading. Think a little harder. Just consider, okay, for a minute, that maybe, if it sounds like you've reached a ridiculous conclusion from reading something, that you might have read it wrong. Yeah? No? Okay? Okay, enough of that. Let me get into who Christopher Rufo is, as promised.
The transgender movement has conquered American life.
You might remember Christopher Rufo, if you recognize his name at all, as one of the people behind the moral panic around critical race theory, which used the scary concept of teaching children degree-level concepts to eliminate any teaching of America's racist history beyond a cursory mention that slavery might not have been a good idea, actually, and to ban books from school libraries from anyone from your mum to MLK Jr. if they mentioned that America might have done a whoopsie with their chronic mistreatment of black people and their crimes against the community. Legal Kimchi did a great video on critical race theory that you should all check out if you haven't, so I won't get into the weeds on this, but nevertheless, that should give you a clue as to the type of person we're dealing with here. Rufo famously called critical race theory an existential threat to the United States that has pervaded every aspect of the federal government, and is a former fellow at a bunch of far-right organizations such as the Heritage Foundation. He's also spoken positively about Hungarian fascist Viktor Orban, encouraged the Trump administration to ban diversity training in government agencies, and is a proponent of the white gender conspiracy theory, making up, along with a bunch of other lies about diversity training course consultants, that the diversity course in California called on students to commit a counter-genocide against white Christians. Easy to say, it did not. Rufo is, in short, and I think you can agree from this, a fascist, and a pretty open one, with ties to a bunch of fascist organizations. And there's no way Rowling doesn't know this. She's been hesitant to associate too closely with open theocratic fascist Matt Walsh, for example, presumably because it looks pretty bad, despite openly praising his fascist work. At this point, not only do we have to assume that she knows who Rufo is, but that she approves of him and his work, probably because he's the author of such articles as Transgender Ideology and the Corruption of Medicine, and because orchestrating a moral panic is kind of what Rowling's just, into now. It's hip, it's cool, it's fun, all the kids are doing it. I mean, all the boomers are doing it. I bring this absolute monster of a human being up for a couple of reasons here. Firstly, because I think it's generally accepted on the left that the whole critical race theory panic is complete bullshit and has fascists at its core. Some people who know this still maintain anti-trans beliefs, despite them having the same people behind them and having a lot of the same politics at their core. Obviously, there are still a slew of arseholes that believe everything Fox and Friends tell them, but I've met a lot of people in person and online who would never support anyone who spouted off obvious racist dog whistles, who were a little more lenient when it comes to transphobic ones, if only because transphobia has only been a mainstream topic for like a decade now, and so the dog whistles aren't as well trodden. The Venn diagram between those who are rightly worried about the critical race theory bullshit and the transphobic bullshit the right have been spouting should be a circle, but it's not quite. So there are people we can convince in the middle here. I want to make this point though because if you can see the horror behind the anti-critical race theory moral panic, I hope it connects to those of you that previously might have been skeptical of trans issues, but well aware of the way Republicans scaremonger about other minority groups. That the argument is similar, the same people are making the argument, and that we not only have a common enemy in this, but that we'll only be able to fend off this nonsense if we stand together as a united front. Mind you, as I'm saying this, I'm reminded of the bullshit things a lot of white trans people say, and so I must remind my fellow pale trans to not do fucking racist shit, because apparently that needs to be said now. We all fuck up, but when someone tells you you fucked up, you should listen. We need each other. We need to stand together. Anyway, I would argue, and I hope most of you would agree with me, that the people Rowling associates with that I highlighted before, Helen Joyce, Posey Parker, and their hangers-on, would be enough of a reason to be suspicious of Rowling's motives regarding the trans question without having to bring up Christopher Rufo. But the thing is, a lot of people don't seem to understand that. And I think that's partially because transphobes tend to be uplifted by mainstream media, at least in the UK. And while Rufo has certainly been praised by his fair share of mainstream news outlets in the US, the descent to his bullshit has been less under the radar. If you knew that buying Harry Potter merchandise would be putting money in the pocket of people like the guy behind a lot of the moral panic behind critical race theory, you might be less inclined to do it. I hope. You should already have been put off by Rowling's behaviour, her anti-trans activism, her endless tirade of hates anyway, but this should be some sort of final straw, no? What am I saying? Every time I see something that should be the nail in the coffin of Rowling being considered someone worthy of respect and with opinions worth listening to, it turns out it just isn't for some reason. Usually because people just like wizard stories more than they dislike the fact that Vladimir Putin invoked Rowling getting cancelled over transphobic comments to justify his invasion of Ukraine as some sort of proof into the horrors of Western civilization he was going to save Ukraine from by invading them? Doing war crimes on them? I'm not sure that's the strategy most of us would go with if we, okay, never mind. No, after Putin? After Kelly Jane Keen Minshall? After Matt Walsh? After Christopher Rufo? I shouldn't have had to say after Putin, surely that should have been a sign. And if, after all this, that still isn't enough, did you know that JK Rowling's children's charity, Lumos, is run in partnership with one Baroness Nicholson, one of the most backwards homophobic ghouls in the entire country, and a literal baroness? Somehow, she's one of the consistently most awful people in the buffet of bastardry that is the House of Lords, an entirely unelected second house in Britain's parliament that most people ignore in everyday life, because it proves that this country is about as much of a democracy as a croissant is a Philly cheesesteak. Listen, if you knew someone whose friends were almost entirely fascists and bigots, would you not think of that friend differently? Would you maybe feel the need to take them aside and ask her, what are you doing hanging out with Swastika Steve over there, Joe? And if your answer to that question, as it should be, is yes, of course, why does that answer change when it applies to someone who wrote some notable stories a couple of decades ago? There are other authors who aren't like this, who wrote different and sometimes better books. JK Rowling isn't the only author on Earth. It might shock you to find out. So, there's no need to keep throwing money at her, especially when that money is actively being used to fund the elimination of trans people in public life. So, The inevitable question I'm sure I'll be asked after this is, am I calling for a boycott of Rowling's work? Do boycotts even work? What's the point in boycotts? Your money all goes to assholes at some point anyway. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism after all, and, well, hold your damn horses here. I would be lying if I said that whether you buy licensed Harry Potter items makes no difference to me. It would sound cooler to be more aloof about it maybe, but the truth is that it just does. Rowling has a huge platform, has been vocal about her seeing money spent on her products as an endorsement of her hateful views, and has admitted to offering to spend money funding hateful bigots like Posey Parker. If you give your money to Rowling, a drop in the ocean though it might be, you are directly funding fascism in the UK and increasingly elsewhere. Given Kelly J. Keen's recent world tour of transphobic hate speech, and the Christopher Rufo of it all, and Matt Walsh, this is not just a UK problem. Although even if it was, why would you be okay with that? So, am I calling for a boycott? Well, I don't have the sort of voice where calling for a boycott would even matter. I have less than 1,700 subscribers on YouTube at the time of recording, and while I've made statements telling people not to buy Potter merch on Twitter, I only have about 1,000 followers on there too. I'm nobody. What would me calling for a boycott do? What I am saying is that if you buy Harry Potter merchandise, buy the books, the games, the movies, from this point onwards, you are directly funding the rise of fascism. If you don't know about all the controversy Rowling's been stirring, since you're mercifully offline, well, now you know, and how can I be more like you? So sorry if you unknowingly gave money to someone who wants me and people like me dead, but now that you do know, if you make another one of those purchases, I want you to think about that. That should weigh on your conscience. Was getting a Slytherin pencil case, a Hogwarts shirt, or eating a chocolate frog worth endangering trans people? Is your enjoyment of boy wizards more important than the suffering of trans kids under the laws Rowling's activism has encouraged and spread worldwide? Is your attachment to a piece of media worth the blood that might be shed if you continue to invest in it? Think about it. If I were a bigger channel, I might well be calling for a boycott. Even though everyone seems to hate it when people do, but, you know, there'd be a damn good reason why. For now, all I can ask is walking around in a Gryffindor shirt worth getting blood on your hands? The rest is, well, up to you. I hope you understand. And even if you don't, thank you for hearing me out. And thank you for watching. Hey everyone, thank you for watching to the end. This is an important one and I hope I communicated it well. There are certain points in here that I really was quite concerned might come across differently than I meant. So please, if I fucked up, please tell me. Otherwise, just thank you for watching and thank you for indulging me. You are gorgeous, amazing people, and you're all my favorites. Hey, speaking of gorgeous, amazing people, if you want to be one of those people that supports this channel, you can pay me on Ko-fi at Brigitte Empire, BRIGITTEEMPIRE, or on PayPal at catherinestrickson@gmail.com. That's CATHERINESTRICKSON@gmail.com. You can also like and subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends, or even better, you could join my Patreon. My Patreon starts from £1 a month, and it has a bunch of new benefits, starting as of a couple of weeks ago. So, I've always been offering a shout out at the end of each video, extra content, exclusive content, early videos, all that stuff, any ability to answer questions, all that good stuff, all the good stuff that you usually expect. Also, but now you can join my Patreon's Discord, get my Nintendo Switch friend code, and get any discounts on future merch because everyone, well, because I love you, but also because I am extremely poor and I need to be able to pay my grocery bill with this by the end of the year. So I would like it if you would help me do that. Obviously, don't pay if you can't. I know times are tough right now, so if you can't afford it, don't. But if you can afford £1 a month, which isn't that much, maybe do it to a chat. Yeah. Okay. I'll stop doing that now. Thank you so much to everyone who's contributed already. You're my heroes, and those heroes' names are Soma Piglet, Meredith Matthews, Thor IS, Artie Wolf, Hayden Gaylor, Greg Noble, No Kings, Only Fools, H, Deanna McMillan, Tweak, Caroline Regalado, Jenny Linsky, Alexandra Lilly, Howard Lott, Lara Van Loon, and Nerania Scarjan, and Joey Cobalt. You guys are incredible. I love you, and thank you for giving me stuff so I can live and not starve to death. You are pretty cool. I owe you a beer or something like that if you're in the neighborhood, which you're probably not. Also, I should really stop going off the cuff. This is why I need a script. All right, thank you all. I love you. Keep on wizarding, baby.